First of all, to understand what is tourismphobia, we could divide the term into two parts. The first one is tourism, that it's basically the movement away from their place of residence for less than 1 year and for purposes like leisure or business. On the other hand, we have phobia. It's the aversion to someone or something, and it could be defined maybe like an uncontrollable fear to acts, ideas, situations, and so on. Therefore, we can summarize that tourismphobia is the fear, aversion, or social rejection felt by local citizens of a destination towards tourists. This situation is occurring all over the world, but mainly in Europe, at destinations such as Barcelona in Spain, Santorini in Greece, maybe at Venice and Cinque Terre at Italy, Paris in France, or in Amsterdam, the Netherlands. And now we are going to see the study presented by George Doxey, where he shows that the tourist destination go through 5 stages. The first one is when the tourists are well received in the destination, even representing a novelty. This is the euphoria. It's basically a positive change in the dynamics of the city until they become so common that there is a certain apathy towards them or indifference, resulting in annoyance due the burden that they represent for the city. The last 2 stages, it's basically antagonism and surrender, according to him, are part of the tourismphobia phenomenon, since it is where a rejection of the consequence of the excess of visitors beginning to experience it and could end in the surrender, where there is no other solution than accept that the transformation of the local environment is inevitable.
The term tourismphobia was introduced in Spain in 2008 by different anthropologists, geographers, and experts in the tourism sector, who warned about the evolution of mass tourism and its unsustainable practices. In fact, one of the first articles that included the neologism of tourismphobia was by the author Manuel Delgado, who published one with the title Tourismphobia on July 12, 2008, in the newspaper El País, mentioning that it is not tourism that has emptied the historical centers of their history and their people, but the management of the city as a business. However, the boom in the use of the word occurred with its introduction in the media in 2017, as the concept began to be normalized to refer to the demonstrations originating in the cities by the local population against mass tourism. The word tourismphobia was of great interest to Spanish society during 2017, specifically in the summer months, coinciding with the months of greatest influx of tourists in the country. This big interest in the search for the concept is due to the fact that during 2017, different protests against mass tourism took place in the Spanish cities of Barcelona and Palma de Mallorca during the summer season, which we will analyze later.
Venice. The historical city of Venice is one of the most famous tourist destinations in the whole world, for reasons such as the geographical location and its unique historical, artistic, and cultural heritage. In 1987, the historic center and lagoon of Venice were declared a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Nowadays, more than 3 million people visit Venice each year, a figure that reflects the large number of tourists that resides. For this reason, the city has undergone a lot of changes over the years. One of them is the decrease in the population living there. And now we are going to see real cases of tourist destinations that present this situation. The main reason for the citizens of Venice to flee their city is the high cost of housing and the invasion of hotels and tourist apartments aimed exclusively at tourists. Housing prices have been skyrocketed, with the square meter costing between 10,000 and 2,000 euros for very old houses in the historical center. In 1965, more than 122,000 people lived in the historical center of Venice, but because of this mass tourism, many of them has been forced to leave their city. Today, there are a fewer than 50,000 people residing there. Another important change that the city of Venice has undergone is the massive arrival of cruise ships, which have become the symbol of this great tourist pressure. The problem of these cruise ships is not only the conglomeration of people that forms along the streets and canals, but it also causes a great negative impact on the ecosystem. It is worth noting that out of the 4,000 million tourists that visit the Venetian city every year, only the 55% of them stay overnight in the city, and the remaining 75% belong to day trippers.
Barcelona is one of the most visited cities in Spain, receiving millions of tourists every year. The tourism industry provided 176 billion euros to the national economy in 2018, representing 14.6% in GDP and about 2.8 million jobs. The current situation of discomfort towards tourism that the city suffers is due to the increase in the number of visitors these last 10 years. The city began to suffer a tourist pressure that has increasingly affected the daily life of the residents. The perception of tourism by the residents of Barcelona is quite negative. In fact, the Barcelona semi-annual barometer records every year the surveys and opinion studies carried out in the municipality. In 2018-17, tourism was considered the biggest problem the city had, although the last year, 2019, problems such as insecurity or access to housing were considered bigger. The emergence of different platforms such as Airbnb, HomeAway, or HouseTrip that offer tourist accommodations has led to an increase in housing prices and rents. Barcelona is one of the cities with the highest ratio of tourist pressure, with 11.1 tourists per 100 residents, according to the study conducted by Exceltur in 2018. The vast majority of these tourists stay in the previously mentioned unconventional tourist accommodation. In the same way that happens in Venice, in some neighborhoods there are more tourists than residents, and the increase of prices in housing rents causes residents to leave the city.
The Balearic Islands are the most visited territory of the Mediterranean Sea. They welcome around 16 million tourists in 2019, with the majority of them arriving during the summer. The tourism of the islands is very important because it is the activity that creates the most jobs and helps with employment. More than 24% of the total employment, with around 142,000 jobs offered, according to Mallorca Radio in 2019, making them the autonomous region with higher GDP in the country. The tourismphobia arrived to Mallorca in 2017, becoming the most concerning phenomenon and questioning the benefits of tourism and looking close up to the negative consequences of the massification of tourism of the island. In 2018, the island welcomed 11,950,342 visitors, according to the Ivestat. This overpopulated the beaches, streets, and airport, annoying the residents. This growth also made it difficult for the local shops that were forced to close and replaced with franchises focused on the tourists and as the main clients. One of the most important consequences is the tourist rentals, which made the rental prices go up notoriously. Between 2013 and 2018, the leases in Palma increased 40%, making it harder for the residents to get a house. The arrival of touristic companies such as Airbnb, that rental touristic accommodations have been taking over the island, with almost 15,000 rental accommodations all over Mallorca. In 2018, this was the island overview.
Barcelona, Palma de Mallorca, Bilbao. These are just some of the cities that have seen waves of anti-tourism protests erupt since 2017. The local governments have struggled to appease local fed up with the consequences of mass tourism on their lives and their neighborhoods. In 2016, Spain was officially the most visited country in the world, with 75.3 million visitors. Despite the perceived positive economic impact of the tourism industry in Spain, the country has seen a wave of anti-tourist sentiment in some of the most popular destinations, from Barcelona to Palma de Mallorca and the Basque Country. The protesters claim that the growing numbers of tourists visiting their cities are affecting the quality of life of local residents, driving up prices and crowding them out of their neighborhoods. Arran is a youth organization of Catalan pro-independence that has manifested itself with protests against mass tourism. This entity has 54 assemblies spread between Catalonia, the Balearic Islands, and the Community of Valencia. In 2017, they carried out different protest actions, including a graffiti on a tourist bus with the slogan "Tourism kills neighborhoods," and punctures on the wheels of rental bicycles and vehicles used by tourists. In Mallorca, there also occur acts of vandalism, such as graffiti on yachts and restaurants. Similar events took place in territories such as the Basque Country, where radical groups launched a campaign against tourist overcrowding.
And now we are going to talk about measures to reduce this feeling of phobia and to control the saturation of very important tourist destinations. This measure nowadays is the most useful to reduce the harmful effects of tourism. Cities such as Venice, Barcelona, or other Mediterranean tourist destinations like Balearic Islands or Santorini have implemented these measures in summer due to the alteration of the tourist experience and due to the overcrowding in these destinations. The second one is adding a price or eco tax. This option has been applied in a lot of places like Balearic Islands, and nowadays it's going so well, and it's another measure would be to improve the quality of the supply by providing incentives for accommodation, gastronomic, hotels, and a lot of tourist services. Another option would be to reduce the seasonality in order to ensure that is no saturation at certain times of the year. And finally, it would also help to review the regulations of state competence in relation to tourist rentals. And now we are going to see an example. This year, Venice has decided to take a further step into the fight against the tourist overcrowding. And from next summer, will charge an entrance fee to their visitors. Entrance to Venice can cost from €3 to €10.
The pandemic's effect. Due to COVID-19 pandemic, all touristic activity was stopped. As we said before, this specific activity is very important to the country's economies. So, as it was expected, the sudden stop of tourism affected the world's economy extremely. Not so long ago, the residents of cities such as Barcelona, Venice, and the island of Mallorca, along with other big cities from all around the world that suffered this touristic massification, were complaining about the over-tourism. Nowadays, in the middle of a pandemic economical crisis, these are the main cities that are asking for the tourist attractions and making all these tourist advertisements to attract the tourists. They walk through Desolated streets that used to be full of visitors, crowded shops, and restaurants. They feel haunted and feel the sadness and the effects of a pandemic that has taken over the countries. They now beg for the touristic arrivals because they need it more than ever.